All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating comparison. We're looking at capitalism, communism, and the Islamic framework, not just as economic systems, but as complete worldviews. Our source material really draws some sharp lines in the sand between these three, so let's just jump right in. So the source starts with this really bold statement. It basically says, look, capitalism and communism, they both grew out of the West. But then it says Islam offers something completely different. It's not just a variation. It's a whole other way of looking at the world. And that's the central idea we're going to explore. Okay, so where do you even begin with something this big? Well, the source breaks it down to two fundamental questions that really get to the core of any system. First, who owns what? And second, how does wealth actually get distributed? So, on the question of ownership, you get three totally different answers. Under capitalism, it's pretty straightforward. You can own pretty much anything you want, no limits. Communism goes to the complete other extreme. Nobody owns privately anything. It all belongs to the state. But then the Islamic framework introduces this really interesting third idea. It says, sure, you can own things, but it's not really yours. You're holding it in trust from God. So ownership comes with strings attached, you know? It's not just a right, it's a huge responsibility. Okay, so what about distributing all that wealth? Again, big differences. Capitalism, as the source puts it, relies on the invisible hand of the market. Communism, more like the iron fist of the state, enforcing equality. But the Islamic system is presented as having this, like a built-in engine designed to keep wealth moving. It does this with two main tools, this mandatory charity called zakat and a total ban on interest, or riba. The whole point isn't just to hand wealth out, but to keep it flowing constantly through society. So let's drill down on that first tool, zakat. The most important word to understand here is obligatory. This isn't a friendly suggestion to be charitable. The source describes it as a requirement, a 2.5% tax every single year on your accumulated wealth. You can almost think of it as a kind of built-in, divinely mandated wealth redistribution mechanism. And that second tool is the ban on something called riba, which is basically interest. Now, why ban interest? Well, according to the source, the idea is to prevent a situation where people get wealthy just by having money and lending it out. It's seen as a way to stop exploitation and keep the economic playing field a little more level. All right, so we've talked about ownership and wealth, but now we get to what the source argues is the real dividing line between these systems, their moral core. We're moving beyond just economics here and into the fundamental beliefs that drive everything. And this is maybe the most surprising claim in the source material. It basically groups capitalism and communism together, saying they're both fundamentally secular. They're man-made systems, right? God or any kind of divine guidance just isn't part of the economic blueprint. The Islamic system, on the other hand, is presented as the exact opposite. It's built on a foundation of divine law from the Quran and Sunnah. So yeah, you can make a profit, you can do business, but everything, and I mean everything, has to operate within a framework of justice and fairness that's laid out by God, not by people. Okay, so that's the theory, but how does this stuff actually work or not work in practice? Well, the source gives us three historical examples to look at, one for each system. First up, for capitalism, the source points to industrial Britain, and it paints a picture of a real double-edged sword. On one side, you have this explosion of wealth, innovation, factories. I mean, the world was changing overnight. But on the other side, you had crushing poverty, horrible working conditions, even child labor. The source frames this as the inevitable price of a system with completely unchecked market forces. Next, for communism, the example is the Soviet Union. And here, the source argues that you have this beautiful idea on paper, a totally equal, classless society that just slammed head-on into a brutal reality. In practice, it meant total state control, which led to immense suffering and the complete loss of personal freedom for millions. And finally, for the Islamic framework, the source goes way back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad in the city of Medina. This is held up as the ideal, a place where trade was booming and people were encouraged to do business, but, and this is the key part, there was a powerful social safety net built right into the system's DNA. The claim is that because of this, nobody fell through the cracks. No one went hungry. So, we've seen the principles, we've looked at the history. How does the source tie this all together? What's the final verdict? Well, it all comes down to this idea of a third way, The source is very clear. This isn't about mixing a little capitalism with a little communism. It's about creating something entirely different. It tries to take the best of both worlds, you could say, the freedom to earn and create wealth that you see in capitalism, combined with the goal of social justice that communism talks about. But the absolute key, the thing that holds it all together and makes it different, is that the whole system operates under a set of divine rules, a moral compass. And so, after laying all of that out, the source doesn't actually give us an answer. Instead, it leaves us with a question. You've got these three very different models, one powered by the market, one controlled by the state, and one guided by faith. The question isn't just which one is best. It's deeper than that. It's asking, what do we truly value? Is it total individual freedom? Is it absolute collective equality? Or is it a balance between the two, guided by something higher? That's the big question this analysis leaves us to think about.